Greetings from the persecuted and the marginalized people of Burma. I'm a Burmese, but I'm not a Myanmar. That is, I do not belong to the major ethnic group called Myanmar, a country's name that was deliberately changed by the dictators to justify the ethnic cleansing that has been going on for more than half a century. Up to this date, somewhat like similar to Bosnia and Rwanda. Of course, we recognize Myanmar language as our lingua franca, and all the ethnic communities residing in the country wants to be the component parts of the Union of Burma, as envisaged by its founder Aung, and is decided to stay in the Union, but not at the expense of the dominance of the Myanmaris over the other ethnic nationalities, who have become second citizens. All the ethnic nationalities combined together constitute more than 50% of the country's population, and so cannot be construed as a minority. Hence, the name Myanmar is both politically and phonetically wrong. Phonetically wrong because the name Myanmar is derived from the South Indian tribe of Burma, where legends have it that they have migrated from there, and should spell Myanmar with no R in it, just like the word mother in English, where we don't emphasize on R and just call it mother instead of mother. These days, the media's highlight on Burma is very much because of the triumphant victory of the pro-democracy movement led by Aung San Suu Kyi over the evil USDP, the butchers of rebellion, silencing the regime sympathizers and self-appointed local and foreign pragmatists or realists who concluded that the lady was brave and admirable, yes, but a stubborn obstacle to reform than a representative of our people. The latest election result is just the beginning. When authoritarian rulers embrace reform, they always do it with the hope of retaining power rather than transferring it. At most, they are ready to share it only so long as they can keep the ultimate control from behind the scenes. Real change comes, if it does, when events later slip out of the hands of those who are trying to manipulate them. This was the story in South Africa, in the post-Franco Spain, in Eastern Europe, and in Russia, where everybody knows that Mikhail Gorbachev is the last officer of the Soviet Union. I think this is also the story too in Egypt since the fall of Mubarak, and is the story of Burma today. In a few weeks' time, you will know of whether this is the first step towards the full democratization, or yet another step, another ploy by the sly Burmese generals to go up and use the opposition led by Aung San Suu Kyi. But this is not to decry the sincerity of the administration of President Thein Sein, who at least have enough brains to know that nearly 60 years of military dictatorship is not working, and that the country has drifted to become the 23rd province of the People's Republic of China's autonomous region, something like Tibet, but in name only. Its over-dependence on the Chinese aid, investment, and diplomatic support for the survival of the military hunters has offended most of the patriotic Burmese. The people of Burma have withdrawn from the sham that political life had become, a pseudo-democratic makeover, and a new class of Burmese officer corps, a novel race has bred that dominates not only the armed forces but the government, the civil and the diplomatic services, and much of the economic life. It includes many whose hands are still soaked with blood, who have systematically raided the public funds and expropriated the national resources. These people want both to retain their privileges and to avoid retribution. Naturally, they want President Thein Sein to secure their privilege rather than to reduce them. Hence, they pressure the reformist Thein Sein, and this is the real motive, raison d'etre, of why the current Burmese regime is so intent to change its image from a power nation and targeted sanctions and other punitive actions of the West. Obviously, the regime wants the West to see the Aung San Suu Kyi's successful election, and not the other part, hidden in the misty mountains and valleys of Kachin state, and in the remote villages of the ethnic nationalities where people are happy living a simple life. There, human rights violations are the order of the day, where the marauding Tatmadaw, the Burmese army, simply do what they want, as they construe themselves to be the monarch of all the survey. Time has proven that constructive engagement practiced by the neighboring countries and initiated by ASEAN countries in prolonging the life of the Hondas so that they can exploit Burma's natural and human resources is not only detrimental to the people of Burma but also to the international community. On the other hand, the punitive actions of the West, particularly sanctions, and the resilience of the people of Burma, especially the ethnic nationalities, have risen and have compelled the Honda to let the Aung San Suu Kyi to make a political comeback. However, this is still a long way. There are layers and layers of sanction, and letting them go some small insignificant aspect as a sign of encouraged democracy is no problem at all. But the civilized international community must be very careful not to put all the eggs in one basket, as even now the Tatmadaw, the Myanmar Army, the second biggest army in Asia next to China, is a state within a state, and will not listen to the government's order of ceasefire as justified by General Min Aung Hlaing on Resident Day, the 27th March, when he pointed out that the Nagas Constitution of 2008 has allowed the army to have its own military tribunals independent of civil judiciary, and they will listen to only the military tribunal. And who knows, the Tatmadaw can stay a military coup, as it often does in the past. And what we have achieved all these years can be overturned in minutes. Remember, the Myanmar generals can never be trusted, as lying, the very concept of truth, has been practiced for scores of decades. But most importantly, the Myanmar-dominated government did not recognize the union of the country, which our founding father, Burma Aung San, father of Aung San Suu Kyi, has built so successfully with the concordat at a little village in Panglong in 1947. So they imprisoned his daughter for nearly 2 decades and embarked upon the ethnic cleansing policy. It was only because of the Western sanctions that have compelled them to relieve their hold. So to remove sanctions and other forms of punitive actions at a time when the government is escalating its brutality against the long-suffering people, especially the ethnic nationalities, would be unconscionable, unethical, and unacceptable to the civilized world. It will also tantamount to condemning tens of thousands of innocent people to the mercy of the quasi-military government, who will be now free of the Western pressures and sanctions. Besides, the country natural is so abundant that it can stay as a hermit kingdom for quite so long, and the only leverage which the Western power have over Burma is sanctions. And once the West lets go the sanctions, there's no leverage to play. And who knows, the general will hark back to military dictatorship. As even now, the dictatorship, the conservative elements of the army, including the powerful senior generals, are still very desirous about the resurgence of a very popular democratic leader. This was proven when Kenyon claimed that he has saved Aung San Suu Kyi from the Tibetan massacre. Next day, he was interrogated. So sidelining a relatively few generals would not so be difficult, considering that Thein Sein will soon be a septuagenarian and be retiring in the next elections. Hence, the West should refrain from lifting the major elements of the sanctions, such as laundering of narco dollars via the Western corporate and ASEAN-based banks, and unfreezing the assets of those generals who had robbed the country treasure until the elections in 2015. Just a mere suspensions of some of the aspects of sanctions to encourage the reformers will be more than enough, for we'll have to keep our hearts hopeful but our eyes open. Thank you very much.